morning fake HOA cops tried to raid my ranch was the morning a former Navy SEAL taught them what a lawful perimeter really is. I came home to Texas to breathe, not to impress. 10 years in the teams, a couple plates in my shoulder, and 40 scrubby acres outside Bandera where cedar fights you fair. I wanted a barn, a shooting berm, 2 mean-spirited goats, a stack of split mesquite, and quiet you can hear. My sister Rachel used to bring her little girl, June, out to ride the mule and fall asleep in the hay. After a drunk crossed a yellow line and we buried Rachel in red dirt, June became mine and the ranch turned from therapy into a promise. Out here, we're safe, and we set our own clocks. Rancho Verde Estates grew up on the ridge to the east, mailers, newsletters, rules about the color beige. They tried to annex my land. I smiled and said no. I signed a simple easement agreement for the caliche lane we share. That's it. My people out here are straight shooters. Hector the farrier, Ruth the retired jag with a cross-examiner smile, Buck the volunteer fire captain, Coyote Bill in his trailer with eyes like a hawk, who runs the post office like a federal church, and Sheriff Ben Holcomb, polite, precise, allergic to nonsense. We hung an American flag above the porch, a Navy flag under it, and June painted the barn sunset red. Our life got simple. Dawn coffee, school drop-off, hay bales, homework, quiet, inciting incident. Halfway through Saturday pancakes the dogs froze. Tires on caliche, LED bars humming, 3 white pickups with Ranch Security Division magnets rolled to my gate. Amber lights strobing like they were auditioning for authority. A man in mirrored shades and a tight polo pointed bolt cutters at my chain. Per Rancho Verde Resolution 11C. Open up for compliance inspection, he barked. Or we cut. Per Texas law and the fact your magnets aren't a badge, I said. You're not cutting anything on my fence. State your business, then get off my line. I'm Chief Compliance Officer Trip Dawson, he said. Reports of unapproved livestock, improper outbuilding color, unpermitted berm construction, and discharging firearms. We have authority to detain pending review. Detain? I repeated, tasting the word. On my land. He jutted his chin. Cut it. I set my mug down like it was wired to blow, propped my phone to record and said, Dot, you still got the sheriff on speed dial? Dot's voice came through my landline speaker. She calls every Saturday to ask about collaches. Ben's already rolling, she said. Mail truck saw lights up your lane. The cutters bit the chain. The second truck spilled a bag of zip ties onto the dirt like a magician with bad tricks. June's hand tightened on the door jamb behind me. Then a Crown Vic eased up without lights, and Sheriff Holcomb stepped out, brim tipped. Morning Cole, he said. We got us a field trip? We got us a misunderstanding trying to be a felony, I said. Ben's eyes skimmed the gear. Which one of y'all is about to explain what detain means on private property that ain't in your HOA? He asked the polos. Emotional core. June's reflection in the window glass looked small in her cow t-shirt that says heifer please because Aunt Rachel had a sense of humor. I promised her boring. Fence mending, mud, burn piles, bad radio, not convoys and zip ties. Combat teaches you to breathe around fear and measure predators. Wolves have a job. These were raccoons with stolen trash rings calling themselves rangers. Rachel told me, the week before she died, you're not done fighting, little brother. You're just fighting for smaller, sweeter things. When their cutters kissed my chain, it felt like a pocket knife sawing at that promise. I don't do panic in front of kids. I do plain. I mouthed okay to June. She nodded once. Tougher than I deserve. First attack. It started months earlier with a paper flapping on my gate. Notice of violation. Unapproved shade of outbuilding. Livestock inconsistent with community vision. Unauthorized berm. Translation. June's sunset red, 2 rude goats, and the backstop where me and Hector responsibly popped soda cans with ears and eyes on. I wrote back, not in HOA. Stop littering on my fence. They mailed a final notice, demanding $500 to Ranch Security Division. I sent it back. Send your lawyer. Bring snacks. Then came tired nonsense. A Facebook post of my truck captioned, some folks don't care about standards, A safety committee lady whispering to June's principal about firearms near children 2 miles away. A kid with amber lights telling my ranch hand the sheriff approved their traffic stops. News to the sheriff. Someone rolled my trash tote to the highway, spray-painted comply, and hammered my mailbox flag into my gate as a citation stake. I photographed everything, printed, dated, and stacked it in a folder labeled silly stuff that becomes serious. Investigation: Ruth brought lemon bars and her jag brain. Title chain first. My 40 acres predate Rancho Verde by 20 years. The plat shows a non-exclusive ingress/egress easement along the east boundary. No HOA burdens, no architectural control, no fines. Rancho Verde's recorded declarations cover lots 1 to 192 on a specific plat. My tract isn't a lot and isn't on that plat. A later annexation amendment lists parcel IDs that skip mine. Whether by malice or laziness, my dirt lives outside their rules. Next, corporate status. Rancho Verde Owners Association Incorporated forfeited its status 9 months last year. Texas won't let a lapsed nonprofit play cop. Then security licenses. Ranch Security Division had a Level 3 company license issued to Gooner with the same last name as the HOA VP. Listed commissioned officers had expired cards. Mirrored Shades guy was the VP's son. Their mailing address matched the HOA management company P.O. box. Pulled certified letters demanding settlement by money order under threat of detention. Topped with a 6-point star that looked a lot like the constable's if you squinted after 2 whiskeys. Ruth fired a 209.005 records demand for minutes, contracts, invoices, and statements. The management firm replied, $2,000 in 90 days. Ruth wrote back, see you in district court. Fees follow the file. Allies appear. Sheriff Ben and Deputy Lila Torres watched my porch video. Ben paused on the ersatz badge. That's a problem, he said. Lila highlit their detain habit. They can't do traffic. They can't trespass you off your own land. They can't police your paint because you ain't theirs. Keep cameras on. Call us if they twitch. Ruth rang a friend at the AG's Consumer Protection Division. Lapsed nonprofit related party security contract. Misleading insignia, mail solicitations, she said. Clipboard, please. Dot's niece Maisie, postal inspection, stopped by on her way to Fredericksburg. Mail fraud's big, but threats plus money orders? We tug those. Threads. Buck the fire captain promised a hazmat briefing level of boredom if they kept running amber lights without permits. Coyote Bill parked a lawn chair by my fence and logged every truck and wave. The sunglasses boy uses your gate like an office, he said. He don't own a toothpick here. System reveal. Ruth's petition to compel records hit Judge Carson's bench. Deborah, the HOA president with a helmet smile, arrived with counsel. The VP's cousin in a borrowed suit. Ruth walked the court through lapse status, unrecorded annexations, detain letters, expired security cards, bolt cutters kissing my chain. Cousin said, overzealous volunteers, and tripped on detain. The judge's eyebrow rose. Detain? By whom? He asked. Produce records in 10 days. Suspend any security using badges, lights, or that word. If I see trucks at that gate again, you'll be explaining yourselves to a jury. The shoebox of records smelled like a cinnamon broom and sang like a canary. 9 months, $48,300 to Ranch Security Division for patrol and special operations. Translation. Policing Christmas inflatables. Checks endorsed by Gooner of the same name and deposited into an account sharing an address with the management company. Vehicle upfit invoices for amber lights and siren modules from Abilene. An annexation agreement for my tract signed by Cole Walker at a UPS store 2 counties over. Ruth smirked. Forgery is spicy, she said. Let's keep it in the cabinet for now. Then the twist. A sunset clause in the original declarations. If not renewed by majority vote within 20 years, covenants expire on any lot not affirmatively renewed. Rancho Verde sat at 19 years and 10 months with no vote on the calendar. Deborah had a 20th anniversary gala planned instead. 3 weeks more of sunlight and the paper would flush the nonsense by itself. We didn't gamble, we built redundancies. Powerflip, Ranch Security Division, posted a photo of 3 black polos hands on hips at my gate, keeping Rancho Verde safe from bad actors. I didn't clap back. I printed it. Lila sent it to the licensing board. False implication of public authority. 2 days later, their temporary authority was suspended pending investigation. The HOA set up a settlement table at the clubhouse. Pay by money order or lien. We brought lemonade and law. Buck set a cooler. Dot brought cookies. Ruth stood and told neighbors, any payment requested under threat of detention is suspect. The HOA's status lapsed. The security is under investigation, and you can't lean off an unadopted resolution. If you've paid, we'll help you claw it back. Sheriff Ben sat under a live oak like a sign that said calm down. Embarrassment did what enforcement couldn't. A recall meeting packed the pavilion. Folks were tired of magnets and cosplay. Deborah and the VP got voted out. In came Marta, the night shift nurse, Greg, the lineman whose hands tell the truth, and Mr. Patel from the hardware store who speaks bylaw like a second language. First act. No person not sworn as a peace officer may represent themselves as law enforcement in Rancho Verde. No vendor with badges, lights, or confusing insignia. Second act. Pass a proper covenant renewal so they can keep their beige by the book and off my fence. Ruth got our injunction against trespass on my line. Judge Carson signed it with a flourish. The same deputy who watched the bolt cutters served it to Gunnar and didn't hide his smile. Payoff plus moral. The private security board revoked Ranch Security Division's license for falsified rosters and insignia, substantially similar to public authority. The AG's office got the management company to sign a consent order, training, fines, and a letter apologizing for overreach. A Sunday word for what they pulled. The sheriff charged Mirrored Shades with attempted criminal mischief for my chain and wrote him a long, expensive warning about impersonation. His community service in an orange vest picking trash on Ranch Road 12 happened the day of the chili cook-off. Maisie didn't bring mail fraud charges because we stopped the money orders. But her letter read like a bedtime story about thin ice and expensive swims. Life got boring again, brag-worthy boring. Marta came by with a casserole to map the gate access respectfully. The amber lights got pulled off the VP's boys' truck. They handed me a sack of zip ties for tomato vines. Rachel's birthday fell on a Tuesday. Our cake rose crooked and tasted perfect. Are they gone for good? June asked. Bullies don't go away, I said. They go looking for the next fence. But we taught them where the line is, and they won't waste time here. If you drive by now, you'll see a fresh chain because I maintain things, a private sign because I can read, and a welcome friend sign because I don't live behind walls. The HOA went back to arguing about pool hours and acceptable beige. No magnets. No amber lights. No costumes pretending law isn't a thing you swear to carry. The morning those fake cops tried to raid my ranch, I didn't raise my voice. I raised the law, my neighbors, and the truth. Then poured another coffee and told June she could paint the barn whatever color sunset was that day. Out here, a badge is earned, a fence is respected, and the day they learned the difference was the day we took our line back. Summer bathe hardens your patience in a way winter never can. By July, the mesquite threw shade like grudges, and the dust on the Caliche Lane learned our names. Most days we earned our quiet. Fix what squeaks, water what wilts, wave at what passes. Then Deborah's replacement board, Marta and the grown-ups, asked if I'd speak at their Saturday, Know Your Easement meet and walk. Not a speech, just neighbor talk. Where your fence ends, where your right-of-way begins, what a deputy can do, what a magnet can't. We met under the pavilion with lemonade sweating through paper cups. Greg brought a stake and a bright line reel like we were marking a football field. Mr. Patel rolled out plat prints big enough to land a crop duster. Lila walked us through trespass in a voice calm enough to lower blood pressure. If you didn't sign it, it probably doesn't bind you, she said, tapping the recorded docs. If it ain't recorded, it ain't real. Somebody asked about my berm. I smiled. It points into dirt, not across the fence. Out here, we point everything into our own problems. People laughed because it felt good to. Someone brought up Trip. Ruth's pencil clicked once. He's in the system's hands, she said. Systems are slow because they should be. But they move. After the walk, a skinny kid with boots 2 sizes too big and a ball cap that said feed store stood awkward at the edge of the crowd. "Sir," he said, eyes everywhere but mine. "My uncle's the one with the lights. He ain't a bad man. He likes to be important." I nodded. "We all do," I said. "Tell him importance feels better when you earn it slow." He nodded back, a yes from the part of him that hasn't hardened yet. A week later, the county fair rolled in hot, dust spinning under Ferris wheel lights like the world's biggest moth. June entered her mule in the youth show and her goat in most stubborn, which I told her was stacking the deck. Hector pretended not to cheat when he coached her on knots. Buck judged the chili contest and took it like a Supreme Court case. Ruth got roped into announcing barrel racers and sounded like she'd been born with a microphone in her hand. Ben walked the rows with a styrofoam cup and a piece you can't fake. That night, under a sky rinsed clean, Tripp's boy walked up to our pen, hands in pockets. No sunglasses this time. "Mr. Walker," he said, quiet. He looked older without the costume. "Sorry about the gate. I let silence do 3 beats worth of work." "You scared my girl," I said. "Don't do that again. You want to feel big? Lift something heavy for someone who can't." He nodded, throat moving like he swallowed stones. "Yes, sir." The apology wasn't for me. It was for himself. That's the kind that sticks. In August, the management company changed hands. The new rep, Alana, drove out to my line in a dusty sedan with a legal pad and 2 waters. "I want to mark the shared easement with you," she said. "So we don't have any more drama." We walked the fence. Grasshoppers helicoptered up in little green bursts. "I wasn't here for any of it," she said, half apology, half statement. "But I read it. We won't hire anyone with badges or lights. We won't put our logo on anything that looks like authority. And if somebody on our side gets froggy, call me." She wrote her number on the back of a hardware receipt because that's what she had. Felt like normal. Normal's underrated. September brought a storm that sat on the ridge and sulked, throwing rain sideways and peeling limbs off like bandages. By morning, a live oak we'd all taken for granite lay across the caliche like a fallen giant, trunk blocking both the HOA's lane and my gate. I was halfway through the second chain on the saw when Greg's bucket truck rolled up with more help than I deserved. Marta passed out gloves. Buck directed traffic like he was born with a whistle in his mouth. Lila and Ben cleared the blind corner. Coyote Bill leaned on a shovel and told the tree it should be embarrassed. Even Gunnar showed, hands clean, eyes down, and he worked without talking for an hour. Sweat equalizes men quicker than sermons. When we'd stacked the last of it into neat rounds, June pointed at the biggest cookies and declared one hers. "Table," she said, plotting. Ruth nearly cried laughing when she realized my niece had called dibs on furniture. Saturday after, we propped that slab on cinder blocks on the porch and ate sandwiches on it. If you want to know when a place becomes yours, it's when your table's a tree you cut with neighbors who remember everybody's worst day and still show up with a thermos. The cases wrapped the way paper wraps. Tripp took the plea on the mischief and a long probation with community service that had him in the school parking lot 3 mornings a week waving kids across the crosswalk. Gunnar's license revocation stuck. The cousin lawyer paid Ruth's fees in a cashier's check he handed over at the courthouse like it was a live snake. The AG's consent order made the management company run a Know Your Rights and Limits training for every board in the county. I got invited to sit in the back. I didn't speak. I watched a room full of people learn that the loudest word in their vocabulary should be please. There was one more flare-up, there always is. A new couple moved into Lot 73 with a YouTube channel and a drone. They flew the thing over fences like curiosity makes you sovereign. It buzzed my goats, swept my porch, and spooked June hard enough she dropped a glass. I walked it back the slow way. The kid behind the channel went defensive, then sorry, then helpful in 6 minutes flat when Lila explained airspace, harassment, and the way neighbors can make your life heavy or light. He knocked on doors for 2 weeks introducing himself the old way. Folks forgave him. The drone learned a new altitude high enough to be boring. Fall cooled the cedar's temper. I rebuilt the gate after school with June holding nails in a coffee can like a foreman with glitter on her cheeks. She asked why I don't get angry longer. I told her the truth. Anger is a match. Useful to start something right. Dumb to hold in your fingers once the fire's caught. She rolled that around like hard candy. So what do we hold? She asked. Receipts, I said, hearing my dad in my mouth. And hands. At Thanksgiving, we put 2 extra chairs at the table without names on place cards and let the day decide who sat there. Dot's husband claimed one and told the same story about a deer stand 3 times like he'd been issued it by law. Coyote Bill took the other and fell asleep mid-pie holding a fork upright like a trophy. After dishes, Ben stood on my porch and looked at the line where the easement meets my dirt. Most of my job is telling folks no, he said. Days like this, I feel like I get to tell him yes. In December, Marta asked if June would help light the neighborhood tree. June said only if the goats could come. We compromised on hats on the goats and a bell on the mule. When the lights kicked on, there was a hush that made the cold feel kind. I caught Tripp's boy on the edge of the crowd, hands out of his pockets for once, clapping with everyone else. He saw me and did the smallest chin lift a man can do and still be understood. I gave it back. He earned that. On a Sunday too clear for excuses, I drove Rachel's old Civic into Bandera to change the oil and pick up a bolt bucket from Mr. Patel. In line, a man I didn't know tapped my shoulder. You the fella with the gate? He asked. I took a breath, ready for whatever came next. He stuck out his hand. Thank you, he said. My wife sleeps easier now. I do too. I shook his hand. Sometimes the world does you the favor of keeping it simple. By spring, our porch table had rings from coffee mugs and a gouge from when Hector swung the hammer wrong and said a word we don't use around June. The gouge stays because truth does. We planted tomatoes again, knowing full well the grasshoppers would file their objections. June painted a fresh patch on the barn because sunset changes and so do we. When the wind comes right, I can hear the pavilion on HOA movie. Night, kids laughing at a cartoon villain who looks a lot like a man in a too-tight polo. That's not revenge. That's a weather report. If you still want an ending, here's the one I keep. The morning those fake cops rolled up, they tried to write their own story with magnets and lights. We answered with paper and people. Paper lasts. People last longer. And out here, when the day burns down and the goats quit pretending they're not plotting, I sit on a slab of a storm-fallen oak with my niece and a dog who snores, and I listen to a fence hum in the wind like a stringed instrument tuned to one note. This is ours, and we keep it with quiet hands that I thought the last of the magnets had peeled off their doors for good. Summer settled into the cracks of our porch boards, and the quiet we'd earned developed a shape. Mornings where the air tasted like cedar and hot iron. Evenings where the far ridge wore that soft bruised blue it saves for people who've had a day. June watered her tomatoes with the seriousness of a surgeon and positioned her mule exactly where she could watch the sun go down like it owed her a show. The dogs slept hard, snoring like old men. We had become ordinary in the ways that matter. I had just finished tinkering with the pump on the stock tank when the wind rolled a sound down the caliche lane I hadn't heard in a while. The mechanical, overeager hum of LED light bars. Not fast, measured, like someone trying correctness on as a uniform. I wiped my hands on a rag and listened. You live out here long enough, your bones pick up a barometer you don't teach. The goats raised their heads in tandem and stared toward the easement like prophetesses who don't charge enough for their services. 2 white trucks crested the cattle guard and eased to a stop at the easement line. Not the gate, 20 yards shy, as if whoever was driving had done this dance and learned where to leave room for the step they were praying went right. The magnets on the doors said Hill Country Community Patrol in a font that tried very hard to look expensive. Beneath that, smaller Regional Compliance Task Force. Amber lights sat on the roof like fresh haircuts. A 3rd truck followed, this one with a utility bed and what looked like a drone case wedged behind the cab. My mouth made a straight line without me asking it to. June walked out with a glass of tea sweating down her wrist. We expecting company? She asked. We're going to be polite, I said, taking the tea from her hand and replacing it with the dog's collars. We're going to be patient. And if anyone says the word detain, you go inside and start the coffee because we're about to have guests. She grinned despite herself. Yes, sir. The lead truck's driver got out wearing a polo embroidered with HCCP and the sort of haircut that believes in itself. He didn't reach for bolt cutters. He did something smarter. He lifted a clipboard and smiled like a man leaning over a church casserole. "Mr. Walker?" he called, voice pitched for neighborly. "Afternoon. I'm Chief Coordinator Colt Jensen with the Hill Country Community Patrol. How y'all doing today?" "Fine until a magnet introduced itself as a person," I said back, not raising my voice. "I'm Cole. What can I do for you?" He stopped at the easement and planted his boots like a man who's learned to pretend lines are sacred. His sunglasses were mirrored, of course they were, and his jaw worked like he'd trained it in a mirror. "We've had complaints from adjacent communities about unauthorized discharge, livestock outside of code, and an unsafe berm near a shared right-of-way." He flicked his eyes toward the backstop with the casual disdain of a man who thinks his taste makes rules. "Per our agreement with partner associations, we're doing a courtesy inspection of the easement and common view." "Courtesy is when you bring pie," I said. "What you're doing is fishing. The easement is ingress and egress, not a parade ground. Common view is HOA talk." "I'm not in your HOA." He smiled wider. "We're not HOA. We're regional. We operate under a constellation of agreements that your lawyer wrote at his kitchen table," I said. "That constellation come with a star shaped like the sheriff's badge? Or do you just rent the light?" He let the smile rest where it was, but his friend in the other truck shifted, and there's always a tail who can't hide where he wants to go. The utility bed's passenger popped the latch on the drone case with slow intention. "You fly that over my place," I said, still pleasant. "You're going to get a masterclass in airspace versus harassment and a demonstration of how fast I can dial a deputy. I'm not mean about it. I'm efficient." Jensen lifted his hands in an open palms gesture meant to calm skittish horses. "We're not here to escalate, Mr. Walker. We're just here to keep the Hill Country safe." "The Hill Country does fine so long as you don't try to improve it," I said. "Who sent you?" The name came out like a cough he couldn't stop. "Rancho Verde, plus Stone Mesa and Twin Bend." I smiled with half of my mouth. "Ah, the coalition of the beige." He took that in, maybe filed it for a meeting where people clap politely when he speaks. "Look, I'm not the enemy," he said. He tugged his polo straight and did a thing with his shoulders I've seen men do right before they tell a story about themselves they think will make you like them. "I served. Bud/S Class 266. 2 deployments. I get the whole line in the dirt thing. But what we're building here is a standard. There's a kind of silence that happens in a man like me when somebody says words that aren't theirs. It isn't anger. It's shoreline going out before a wave." I didn't move. I did look at his hands. No telltale callus across the bases of the fingers. No knife habit. No watch mark where a dive watch would have lived. He could still be real. Men lose habits after years behind a desk. But he'd picked the wrong detail to drape himself in, and the way he said it sounded like he'd practiced in the car. "What was your boat team?" I asked conversationally. "Team 5. He said so fast it tripped itself. "Coronado. What's the trident number you were issued?" I asked, just as conversational. His smile stayed. His eyes did not. "Why does that matter?" he asked, light. "Oh, it doesn't," I said, like I'd asked about his preferred fly line weight. "It's just the kind of thing you don't forget." He felt the ground under him shift a degree. He put weight on the clipboard. "We're not here to litigate the past," he said. "We're here to make sure everyone plays by the rules." "Whose rules?" I asked. He opened his mouth to answer, and a voice behind him saved him from having to lie twice in a row. "Afternoon, gentlemen," Sheriff Holcomb said, stepping out of his Crown Vic with a heat of the day sigh. "I heard y'all were forming a constellation out here and thought I'd bring a telescope." Jensen brightened like a man who thinks a referee just arrived to confirm his call. "Sheriff Holcomb," he said, shaking like he meant it. "Chief Coordinator Colt Jensen with Hill Country Community Patrol." He showed the badge-shaped logo sewn on his chest like it had special powers. "We've got agreements with partner associations to provide common view safety, and we're here to do a courtesy inspection of the easement per Per nothing I've seen that gives you the authority to do anything but drive past with both hands on 10 and 2, Ben said mildly. He tipped his hat at me. Cole. Sheriff, I said. This gentleman was just telling me his trident number. Jensen blinked slow. Excuse me. Ben rubbed the bridge of his nose with 2 fingers and looked exactly like a man who has learned to love his aspirin. Mr. Jensen, we've been through a version of this dance, and I'm not interested in shuffling to the same tune. You can walk that easement by foot if you're truly investigating a reported crime, in which case you'll call me first. You can't commandeer it as your platform. You can't fly a drone over private pasture without permission except in very specific, very boring situations that don't begin with the words, "We got a complaint." And you can't use symbols that confuse folks into thinking you've got a commission when you don't. You want to keep the hill country safe? Call me when you see something that isn't beige enough for your magazine. I'll tell you if it's illegal. Jensen tried to take the hit like a pro. The drone case clicked shut. The second truck turned its amber lights off like a man buttoning a collar he had no business unbuttoning. Sheriff, he said, a little quieter. We just want standards. Ben nodded. So do I. Mine is called the law. Jensen met my eyes a beat longer than was friendly. We'll be in touch, he said. I imagine you will, I said, and watch them go because people tell you who they are when they leave. That evening, Hector sat on my porch and spit a sunflower seed into the yard with the chapel-level reverence of a man treating tobacco well. You hear the one about a man who bought himself a trident down by the river? He asked. Don't, I said, laughing. I'll end up calling someone I don't want to. You're going to whether I tell it or not, he said. Besides, Ruth already texted me. She's hungry. Ruth arrived 20 minutes later with a folder that looked heavier than paper. She has a way of approaching a problem like it's an animal that needs to be coaxed into a truck bed without anyone getting bitten. Hill Country Community Patrol, she said, tapping the logo. They're in love with their fonts. Corporate registration is out of Travis County. They've got 4 contracts signed with boards we know and 1 pending with Twin Bend that would give them access to gated entries. Here's the fun part. They're marketing themselves as a cooperative safety solution led by former special operations veterans and former law enforcement. They've got a training calendar with something called detention dynamics taught by, she turned the page, Chief Coordinator Colt Jensen, former SEAL Team 5. Hector whistled. No notes. I took the page and read the bio. It had the shape of the kind of lie that leans on outsider ignorance. Units named wrong, jargon placed like it was sprinkled by a generous toddler, years that didn't line up with dates anyone would remember who'd been paying attention. Want me to call a man who knows? Ruth asked. Because I know a man who knows. You know him, too. It is not a card you play lightly, pulling the thread that unmasks a stolen valor costume. I don't go around checking patches on strangers. But if a man is going to wear my work while shaking down my neighbors, he should be ready to have that work's owners walk into the room. I'll call, I said. Not because it'll feel good, because it'll be clean. His name is Hank Marin, and he made chief the same year I learned that the ground is just another ocean if you go hard enough at it. He moved out near Uvalde to raise dogs and not answer his phone, but he answers for a handful of us old dogs because that's what we are now, a handful. He picked up on the second ring and didn't bother with hello. You only call me during storms, he said. How big is this one? Medium, I said. I gave him Jensen's name, the bio paragraph, the boat team claim. Hank snorted, the sound of a man who keeps a list in a little book just so he can ignore it until he needs to take it out. Negative on 266, he said, after too few seconds for it to have been a search. Negative on 5. The way he wrote the timeline is wrong regardless. You can tell him to stop telling stories at barbecues. Appreciate you, I said. You going to make him eat it in public? Hank asked. I'm going to make him stop using it to scare old ladies, I said. I don't need a scalp. I need quiet. Good, Hank said. Because every time we take a scalp, 2 boys who don't know any better try one on for fun. This one's not fun. It's business. Hit the business. Ruth smiled when I told her. See, she said, tapping the folder. This is why we're friends. You like clean. The business, as it turned out, was a matryoshka doll of companies passing paper to themselves. Hill Country Community Patrol's corporate parent was Hill Country Cooperative Management, which shared a registered agent with Hill Country Advisory Group, which shared a P.O. box with a company that did website design for HOA boards and billed itself as your full-service community partner. In the corner of a PDF no one thought anyone would read was a footer, prepared by Jensen Holdings. "Look at this," Ruth said, sliding a printout of an email across the table. It was from someone on Twin Bend's board, a man named Lester, with a subject line that read, "Regional Task Force Opportunity." The text pitched the patrol like a Costco membership with sirens. Shared safety reduces our individual risk. They operate in the gray areas where law enforcement can't always be present. They have detention curriculum designed by veterans with real-world experience. Attached was a memorandum of understanding that would authorize Hill Country Community Patrol to use amber safety devices and uniform identifiers within Twin Bend's boundaries and adjacent rights-of-way at the board's discretion. "This is smarter than Rancho Verde's last attempt," I said. "Duller at the edges. But the core is the same. Difference is scale," Ruth said. "They're selling it like a movement." We started making calls, not the friend kind, the neighbor kind. Marta from the new Rancho Verde board answered on the first ring. "Yes," she said before I spoke. "We got the pitch. We put it on the agenda so folks could yell with the lights on." Mr. Patel sent me a photo of a flyer Jensen's people had stuck under the windshield wipers at the grocery store. Buck called to tell me he'd been invited to a joint briefing where Hill Country Community Patrol promised to coordinate with first responders in emergent situations. "I told them coordination starts with my phone ringing first," he said, and I could hear the smile in his mustache. "Sheriff Holcomb asked me to ride along, which is his way of telling me he's going to do his job and also wants a witness whose notebook fits in a pocket." We showed up at a community center one town over where Hill Country Community Patrol had rented a room for a public safety forum. It smelled like coffee and fear. A dozen homeowners, mostly older, mostly tired, sat in metal chairs arranged in two polite arcs. Jensen stood at the front beside a projector screen that displayed a logo involving a star that had spent too much time looking at a state seal. He was telling a story about a break-in and a teenager and a narrow miss that would have been tragic if he hadn't changed the pronouns twice mid-sentence. "We don't replace the sheriff," he said, holding his hands out like they were offering a cake. "We compliment him, just like the teams used to compliment the rest of the Navy. We operate in that gap where rules meet reality." He turned his chin toward a man in the front row. "Mr. Linton, you remember when that car sat on your street for 3 days and the sheriff said there was nothing he could do? We can do something. We can tag. We can tow. We can detain. And while we wait on backup, we make sure nothing bad happens." Ben raised his hand from the back row like a kid in Sunday school who knows the answer and wants to be kind about it. "Sheriff's office doesn't need backup from a company selling zip ties," he said, congenial. "We need folks to call us when there's a problem and wave with all 5 fingers when we drive by. If there's a car parked past 72 hours, I'll write the ticket. If there's a kid up to no good, I'll talk to him first and his mama after. If there's a break-in, I don't want a man with a polo standing between me and my work." Jensen did not bristle. He adjusted. "We're not standing between anyone and anything," he said. "We're simply present. And your men," Ruth whispered next to me, reading the brochure, "are trained in the latest detention dynamics. Spell it with a K and sell it at a gun show." At the Q&A, an older woman told a story about being approached outside her mailbox last year by a compliance officer who told her the wreath on her door was unseasonal for February. She asked if Hill Country Community Patrol would be polite. Jensen leaned into polite like a man finding a step in the dark. "Ma'am," he said, "we pride ourselves on courtesy. We have a veteran culture. We carry ourselves with honor." "Which class did you say you were?" I asked from my seat, too far back to see his face if it flinched. 266, he said, not missing a beat. "Got it," I said, and wrote down the time like it mattered. After, in the parking lot, a man with a clipboard stopped me. "You a veteran?" he asked. tone that meant he wanted to hand me a discount if I said yes. Wrong color, I said, pointing at my shirt. He laughed and put the clipboard out anyway. Sign up? Show support for regional safety. I signed with my name and number and a note. Please stop saying detain. Confuses the righteous. We could have gone scorched earth that night. Printed flyers, posted receipts, stood on a folding chair and called the man a liar in front of strangers who would have clapped purely out of relief that someone else had said something out loud. Ruth shook her head when I floated it. He doesn't need humiliation to learn, she said. He needs regulation. Hit the parts that hum when you tap them. The licensing board, the AG, the Security Commission, the nonprofit statute. If we aim at the biography, he'll turn it into a fight. If we aim at the business, he'll have to learn to be small. I've learned to trust her when she uses words like that. Small, clean, learn. We put together a packet for the private security board with screenshots, contract language, and a half-dozen quotes where the word detain strutted into sentences like a naked man at a wedding. Ben wrote a letter in his tidy, no-nonsense hand on sheriff letterhead. This company's language and insignia are confusing the public and are not consistent with the authority granted by state law. Please review. Maisie at Postal Inspection took copies of the settlement by money order letters that old outfits used and new outfits might try. We like patterns, she said. Also, whose idea was Regional Compliance Task Force? It sounds like a high schooler trying to impress a scholarship committee. Probably was, I said. The match that finally found the Tinder came from a direction we didn't plan. A video on the internet. A channel that likes to watch men pretend to be soldiers posted an interview with Chief Coordinator Jensen, former SEAL, filmed in front of a brick wall and a flag that had the wrong number of grommets for the kind of cloth it was. He told a story about a mission in a place that didn't match the weather he described. He used a word no one uses. The comments did what comments do. Within 12 hours, a real frogman who likes to educate the public had posted a response, not mean clinical. Names, dates, the quiet power of we looked. You cannot unring certain bells. The video moved through the neighborhood faster than pizza coupons. Jensen didn't show up at the next forum. His partner, a man with a face like a countertop, did, and spoke without using any proper nouns. Our chief coordinator is stepping back from public-facing duties, he said. We're focusing on partnerships. He smiled and it made me tired. Partnerships with who? I wanted to ask. People who believe harder than they read? Twin Bend did not sign the MOU. Stone Mesa tabled it. Rancho Verde voted to seek other solutions, which in HOA language means, we are going to meet under this tree where there is no microphone and talk like we're in a backyard. The private security board opened an inquiry. The AG's Consumer Protection Division sent a letter that used words like misleading and confuse. None of that is sexy. All of it is an undertow you don't fight if you want to get back to shore. Jensen showed up on my easement one more time anyway. Not with trucks. Alone. He came at dusk, when the cicadas ring their little bells loud enough to make your teeth hum. I saw him because I see the world like a blind man hears it, and his boots kick up dust differently than a neighbor who belongs. He stood at the easement and took his sunglasses off, and for the first time I saw his eyes. They were just brown.